or hundreds
as Syria emerges from
Imagine armed men came to your neighborhood, began killing your family and your neighbors, and the world didn't seem to notice. This isn't a hypothetical. It just happened on the coast of Syria. On March 6th, unrest erupted in Latakia and Tartus as militants affiliated with the former Assad government launched attacks on Syrian government forces. The uprising was suppressed, but it sparked a brutal response. Thousands of militants, both from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, now part of the Syrian government, and the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army, or SNA, descended on the Syrian coast and began stealing from, assaulting, and indiscriminately killing predominantly Alawite civilians.
Allahu Akbar.
The full extent of the casualties is unclear, in large part because the new Syrian government has made free movement impossible and Alawite communities have been unable to compile complete death tolls. But more than 1,000 civilians have been killed, and that's likely a low estimate. The Alawites, an Islamic minority, make up about 10% of the population of Syria. The Assad family is Alawite. During their rule, Alawites were seen as getting preferential treatment from the regime. But Alawites who lived in Syria under the Assads say that this is an unfair generalization.
The Alawite community has long been caught in the crossfire of Syria's political struggles. The regime kept them isolated from the country's economic development, and their villages were devoid of factories, businesses, or any real infrastructure. While some Alawites supported the regime, many others have been victims of it, longing for change, but afraid to speak out.
In the past few days, social media has been flooded with virulent anti-Alawite rhetoric. People are calling for their expulsion from Syria and celebrating the horrific violence against them.
أشلاء حتى على الأرض لا تبقوهن، الأرض لا تنجسوها في دمهم.
حتى الحيتان بالبحر عم تشكرنا، حتى القرش سمك القرش عم يتشكرنا على الدعم الإنساني والغذاء الذي.
The coast must be completely cleansed of Alawites and must be resettled with Sunnis. This one's in a Facebook group for car sales. And along with the overt hatred for Alawites, many of those who've covered the massacres on the Syrian coast have been smeared as Assadists and accused of supporting the Assad regime. Let me be clear, I'm not that. I've covered the Syrian war for over a decade. I've spent time with most sides, even HTS in their previous iteration as Jabhat al-Nusra, because they kidnapped me while I was covering the Assad regime's war crimes.
الآن في مدرسة من أحد المدارس التي قام النظام بقصفها كانت هذه المدرسة.
طيب إمتى أنت تفكري إن الحرب رح تنتهي هون بسوريا؟ مدة قصيرة مدة طويلة؟
لحتى يموتوا كل العالم يعني أظن حتى تنتهي.
The Assad regime's atrocities don't erase the brutal acts committed by the new Syrian government, and they certainly don't justify the targeting of an entire ethnic group. The sheer number of videos showing militants chasing down and killing civilians is unprecedented. In all my years covering this conflict, I've never seen such widespread enthusiasm for murder. I won't show you the gruesome executions. Instead, you should hear from those who survived this nightmare.
جثث بالطريق بحي واحد قاتلين فوق 150 إنسان.
شوفير عنا بالمدرسة اسمه أبو بشار، هو من الجندارية، ذبحوله أمه وأخته وأخوه.
علوش ذبحولي خيي قصري علي ذبحولي خيي بالبيت، فاتوا على البيت وذبحولي بقلب البيت يا الله.
To make matters worse, the media immediately downplayed the violence, blaming the murders on clashes, fighting, and remnants of the Assad regime. Responses from foreign governments were equally insufficient. The German Foreign Ministry's call for all sides to seek peaceful solutions ignores reality. HTS and SNA militants systematically targeted Alawite civilians. It wasn't surprising that pro-HTS think tanks and sympathetic news outlets rushed to dismiss the violence on the coast. Their first move was denial. They claimed HTS and SNA forces had only targeted Assad loyalists who were attacking them. But then, HTS and SNA flooded social media with so many videos, including some showing themselves hunting down elderly men who clearly weren't involved in any military activity. Suddenly, the Assad remnants narrative didn't hold water, so the new Syrian government and their fans pivoted. Now the killers were conveniently not affiliated with the government. HTS commanders told their men to stop filming what they were doing, but not to stop doing what they were doing.
تصوير ممنوع. الأخ بده يصور بده يتحاسب.
Then came claims that all of the violence on the coast was committed by the SNA forces alone, though this HTS militant admitted to HTS's involvement while expressing horror at what his brethren were doing.
ورسالتي لسماحة الشيخ أبو محمد الجولاني أحمد الشرع ولكل القادة العسكريين. يا شيخ، هالقتل يلي صار قتل المدنيين الآمنين في بيوتهم، هل ديننا أمرنا بهالشهاد؟
Immediately, people accused him of being an Alawite. Since the fall of Assad in December, incidents of kidnapping, murder, and other abuses have often been blamed solely on the SNA, despite evidence implicating HTS as well. And in the recent coastal violence, foreign HTS jihadis also filmed themselves taking part in atrocities. This is Egyptian Arabic. There aren't any Egyptians in the SNA. Recently, dynamics within the SNA have been shifting significantly. Turkey already ceded much of the administrative control of the SNA to HTS. An SNA commander told me that salary payments for most factions now depend on SNA militants agreeing to join HTS, which is all to say that the lines between these groups are becoming blurred. In an apparent attempt to counteract viral murder videos shared by their own militants, both HTS and SNA commanders have posted highly staged encounters with civilians. Jolani, or Ahmad al-Shara, promised accountability for the violence on the coast. Some militants seen in murder videos were arrested, but given HTS's history, these actions seem more like PR than real justice. On Monday, al-Shara and SDF commander Mazloum Abdi signed a memorandum of understanding to integrate the SDF into the Syrian armed forces. The deal promised to preserve Kurdish rights through local governance. Virtually all of Syria took to the streets in celebration. Reminder, the violence on the coast was still unfolding at this point. Imagine being an Alawite in Latakia whose relatives were murdered by Syrian government forces, and a day later, the whole country is celebrating the government. By Thursday, the celebrations had stopped, because al-Shara signed a new constitution granting himself sweeping powers, including control over parliament and the Supreme Court. It also failed to mention Christians, Kurds, Yazidis, and other minorities. The Syrian Democratic Council immediately condemned the constitution, calling it authoritarianism rebranded. While the Alawites are the biggest target currently, other minorities aren't safe from harassment at the hands of the Syrian government. In the past few days, Christians and homes have also been targeted. There have been reports of kidnappings, executions, and assaults on homes and businesses. With so many large-scale atrocities happening, smaller incidents of harassment often go unnoticed. A Christian man in a major city was harassed by a Syrian government officer for drinking coffee in a cafe during Ramadan, a time when Muslims typically fast.
I was sitting at this cafe, just having coffee. All of a sudden, an SCS General Security Officer walks in with his, firearm, and he kind of nodded to me from afar and said, "Are you Sunni?" I was like, "No, I'm Christian." And then he approached me, and the first thing he said, "Why are you being disrespectful? Ramadan and people are fasting and they're coming and going outside the cafe and you're just eating and drinking in plain sight." And then, the discussion here up a little bit.
After the fall of Assad, Jolani insisted that Christians in Syria were safe and could freely practice their religion.
Now, the narrative is still the same, but they're constantly pressing the church leadership to succumb to the will of the state. I mean, all patriarchs, they don't have confidence in this government. At the end of the day, we know who they are. Terrorists and extremists don't reform overnight. So we know what has been done, what has been said, is just to win over the West, for the purpose of sanctions lifting and, taking HTS and Jolani himself, Ahmad al-Shara, off the terror list. No minority group is safe in Syria, whether it's the Christians, the Druze, the Alawites, no one is safe. They will come for each group in due time.
ايش يعني سوري مسلم ولا درزه؟ درزه يا اخي درزه زي هو درزه هاويته درزه هاويته درزه ولا لا؟ يا اخي درزه الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Fighting in Syria's southern city of Sveda has left more than 900 people reportedly dead in sectarian clashes. Syrian government forces accused of atrocities against Druze civilians.
Conflicts between the Druze and the neighboring Sunni Bedouin tribes have been a constant throughout Syrian history. They have been happening for centuries. This episode marks the first time that the central government in Damascus deliberately took the side of the Bedouin tribes in these clashes with the Druze.
ويقولون لنا الأهالي هنا أن هذه الجثة على سبيل المثال قام دواعش الجولاني بدفها وهو حي. هذا هو هذه آثار الدبابة.
إعدامه.
هؤلاء هم الذين يسمون أنفسهم الأمن العام والجيش السوري، دواعش الجولاني الإرهابيين.
آثار قذائف الهاون وقذائف المسيرات التي استهدفت منازل المدنيين في حي مساكن الخضر في مدينة سويداء.
Suwaida, or Jabal al-Druze, the Druze mountain as it's known in Syria, has always stood a little bit apart. Since the Assad regime fell, it has been almost entirely autonomous. The local Druze militias are manning the checkpoints, they are policing the streets, they are governing their own affairs. And the central government in Damascus has been negotiating for months to insert a presence. They wanted to make an example of Druze autonomy, of breaking Druze autonomy and bringing Suwaida back under the firm control of Damascus. And in order to do that, they invited in tens of thousands of Sunni militiamen from all parts of the country. And within a day, we were seeing gruesome videos of beheadings, execution of Druze civilians, of bodies lying in hospitals, clearly summarily executed, and widespread scenes of looting, ransacking, and vandalism with a heavy sectarian overtone.
بدنا شهاداتكم على المجازر اللي قامت. شو انتم شاهدين؟ شهادتكم على الاحداث اللي تمارست هون.
هاي الارض بتشهد هون، هذا الوضع بيشهد هون.
جماعه طائفيين فاتوا كبروا علينا لولا لطف الله، وكان موجود بطل بهالحاره الله يرد عنه وعن اولاده، هو اللي تصدى له، وكان شخص لحاله على فكره يعني، وهن فاتوا اخر شيء فاتوا انتقاميه، فوتوا الدبابه تبعهم لهون وبلشوا مثل ما انت
على ما سمعنا قالوا انه
ما تخلي حدا،
لا ما بتخلي حجر ولا بشر هيك.
Imagine armed men came to your neighborhood, began killing your family and your neighbors, and the world didn't seem to notice. This isn't a hypothetical. It just happened on the coast of Syria. On March 6th, unrest erupted in Latakia and Tartus as militants affiliated.
This game is all about precision, right? You're shooting these colored bubbles, matching them up.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in Syria. And to understand what's happening, we need to talk about the Alawites, who they are, where they come from, and how they went from being this marginalized mountain people to ruling Syria for the last 4 decades. The Alawites were never part of Syria's urban elite. They weren't the ruling class in Damascus or Aleppo. They didn't control trade routes or govern empires. They were known as an unruly mountain people, isolated, self-sufficient, and far from power. For centuries, they lived in the coastal mountain range of northwestern Syria, in and around Latakia and Tartus. This wasn't rich, fertile land. It was rugged, difficult terrain that made large-scale agriculture impossible. Most Alawites were peasants, farmers, and herders, cut off from the cities, governing themselves in small, close-knit communities. And this isolation shaped their entire history. While the Sunni majority ruled the cities, like Damascus, controlling trade, education, and the military, the Alawites historically were outcasts, far from the centers of power. During the Ottoman times, this divide only got worse. The Ottomans saw Syria's Sunni urban elite as their natural allies, appointing them as governors and administrators. Meanwhile, the Alawites were pushed further and further into the mountains, taxed into poverty, and forced to rely on their own communities for survival. And for centuries, they had no power, no influence, and no future in the politics of Syria. But then something happened that changed everything. Fast forward to World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapses, and the European colonial powers divide up the Middle East like a chessboard. In 1916, Britain and France signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement, carving up the region. Britain takes Palestine and Iraq, France takes Lebanon and Syria. And when the French arrive in Syria, they have a problem. The Sunni majority doesn't want them there. Almost immediately, revolts break out. And the French need an ally, a group who has no loyalty to the Sunni elites, one that they can rely on. And that's where the Alawites come in. The region the Alawites were from, Latakia, is a coastal region, and it became really important to French rule because the French ruled Syria by controlling the coastline. And so the Alawites became a natural ally to the French. And in the 1930s and 40s, France started to recruit Alawites into their military and police forces. And these officers, many of them from humble, rural backgrounds, would go on to form the backbone of the Syrian military that took shape in the 1960s. But then eventually the French pulled out of Syria, and Syria gained its independence in 1946, and that's when things really started spiraling. The new government couldn't hold it together. It was coup after coup, instability at every turn. And by the late 1950s, things had gotten so bad that Syria turned to Egypt and said, let's unite, let's form a union, forming the United Arab Republic in 1958, which was one of the first true experiments in pan-Arab nationalism, which was led by none other than the president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser. But here's the thing, from day one, Egypt dominated the union, and the Syrians felt they were just along for the ride, constantly getting the short end of the stick. And it didn't take long for this resentment to boil over, and by 1961 the whole thing collapsed, throwing Syria right back to its usual chaos, coup after coup and counter coup, with a new ruler every few years. That is until 1970, when an Alawite fighter pilot by the name of Hafez al-Assad made his move. Now Hafez al-Assad, he wasn't just another military officer looking for power. He was sharp, he was calculating. He had seen how leaders before him had been toppled, and he knew that if he wanted to hold on, he had to play the game differently. So eventually, when he pulled off this smooth, bloodless coup and declared himself president, the first thing he did was build a new intelligence network called the Mukhabarat, which were kind of like the secret service of Syria. And they had eyes everywhere and were listening to everyone. And Hafez al-Assad wasn't just paranoid for the sake of it, he had good reason. He was ruling as an Alawite, a tiny minority, only about 12% of Syria's population, in a country where power had traditionally been held by the Sunni majority. And he knew that if he ever lost control, the Alawites would likely never get another chance to rule Syria. So he played his cards very carefully. He filled the military and intelligence agencies with his own people, Alawites. After all, if you control the military and if you have all the weapons, you pretty much control the country. But he also wanted to be fair and appointed many Sunnis to key government positions to keep them happy. And it was through this balancing act that he performed so well that he managed to stay in power for decades. Then in 1982, the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, who were feeling increasingly sidelined under Hafez al-Assad's rule, decided to rise up in the city of Hama. They saw an opening, a chance to challenge this regime. But Hafez al-Assad was not the kind of man to negotiate with rebels. His response was swift and brutal. He sent in the army, encircled the city, he bombarded it with artillery and airstrikes, and Hama was leveled to the ground. Thousands, maybe even tens of thousands were killed, and the message was clear: rebellion would not be tolerated. And after that, no one dared to rise up against him or his family again, and the Assads would rule Syria for the next 50 years until finally in 2024 his regime fell. And now with the Alawite regime and the Assad family gone, the Alawite civilians who had nothing to do with the Assad regime are being hunted down and killed. Alawite villages in Latakia are disappearing. Families are being executed in mass killings, and the same Islamist groups that were backed by the West and armed by countries like Turkey are now wiping out an entire people in the northwest of Syria. The massacres in Latakia are not just random acts of violence, they're actually part of a history that never really went away. That's why even during the uprising in 2024, you saw many of these HTS fighters burning the grave of Hafez al-Assad. There's so much bad blood between these groups.
We came here to the graves of Hafez al-Assad, Basel and Anissa to take a look at these filthy people because they oppressed the entire Syrian people.
The groups that were once called freedom fighters a few months ago have turned into something else entirely. So after everything, the coups, the wars, the uprisings, what really changed? Because it looks like Syria just traded one brutal dictator for another, which is way, way worse. If you enjoyed that video, please consider subscribing for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.
(6:28 a.m. on October 7. 19-year-old surveillance soldier Ronnie Eshel at the Nahal Oz border outpost sees the beginning of the Hamas attack.
Homs was called the capital of the Syrian revolution, but these are the homes and the streets where the people who rose up in it were massacred. Abu Abdullah was 18 when it all started, joined a local militia, fought Assad soldiers and Hezbollah fighters street by street here.
الخوف عندهم شديد انه لا تقلب مثلا انه يرجع بشار الاسد على الحكم.
After years in Idlib, he's returned to Homs, not just the victor, but part of a security detail, charged with looking after both his Sunni and Alawite neighbours. The Alawites are the Shia sect from which Assad drew his support and populated his army. He takes out his phone and shows us videos, some set to music, of how Assad's soldiers tortured his compatriots. These are the communities where returning Sunni militants are living cheek by jowl with Alawites, some of whom they fought against. This time, people like Abu Abdullah are in charge of keeping the peace. But there's a lot of painful history to unpack on these streets.
هن بعد ما دمروا خلصوا فكتبوا العبارة هاي هذا من فكر أن يحارب العلويين فنحن هاي شطبنا عليه بس إنه الطائفية اللي عندهم.
In the Alawite part of the area, the buildings are not as badly damaged. The Assad family weaponized their Alawite minority identity to maintain control. We meet Ranad, her husband Mohammed and their daughters. How vulnerable does she feel now that Sunni militants are policing her neighborhood?
أما هون نحن كحارة هون اللي ما عليه شيء أبدا ما حد يقرب صوبه وأنا هون من 18 سنة وحتى ما بفكر أطلع برات حمص لأنه هاي بلدنا وبنحبها كتير.
That night, Abu Abdullah and his men patrol both Sunni and Alawite areas. They're carrying sidearms but told us that they kept them concealed so as not to alarm Alawites. And to the big question, can you fairly police a population who you in part hold responsible for what happened here? For a young soldier we met by chance, he is remarkably on message.
والأوامر الحكومية عم تجينا إنه ما نقرب ولا نحكي هلا الدم خالص الدم يعني خلص الماضي راح مع الماضي.
No one's under any illusions here about the potency of sectarian tensions. But if the people who know where that ends and don't want it again get to decide, then on the dark streets, a light flickers. Homs was called the capital of the Syrian revolution.
Look around me.
This is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Damascus. It's also majority Alawi, the same sect as the former President Bashar al-Assad. And although everybody here is quite happy that Assad is gone, they're worried that they will pay the price for his crimes, even though they say they were just as oppressed, if not more oppressed, than their fellow citizens. It used to be that you would see a lot of posters of soldiers who were killed in the army. There's conscription here in Syria. Young men have to serve. When Damascus was freed from the Assad regime, they say they ripped up all the posters. They didn't know who was coming in, and they didn't want to be killed in revenge killings. Look around me. This is
To the partner.
What I saw the next morning changed my life forever. In fact, I would still be a sergeant in the Ranger Regiment today if it wasn't for what I saw the morning after the firefight. When I got back in the next morning, it wasn't really the blood and the bullet holes that had an impact on me. I'd seen that stuff before. But when I got back in the next morning, there were men, grown men, some of the toughest warriors on planet Earth, who were walking up to me with tears in their eyes saying, "Jeff, I gotta talk to you." And almost all of them were saying, "Jeff, there was something different about you last night than there was about me, and I want to know what it was." And for the next 24 hours, I had guys lined up to ask me about Jesus Christ because they could see the difference that he makes when you're getting shot at.
Ethan Hawke, what do you think happens when we die?
You ready? I don't think we die. I don't think that we have an understanding of the divine concept of time.
This is the gelatin recipe that took me.
All I need is a love tonight.
I'm a Palestinian. From 21 until 48, I carried a Palestinian passport.
How long before I see?
Why Christians?
How long before I see?
This is the gelatin recipe that took me from 107.
Hi there! Would you like to receive a gift? I'm a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
This man is still shaken. He says he has been receiving death threats for weeks now, but has decided to speak out about what happened to his sister. For his safety, he does so anonymously.
My sister used to take the minibus to work in Tartus and back every day, until the day she was kidnapped.
Like around 60 others, the young woman was kidnapped while she was on her way to the nearby city of Tartus.
People at the station saw her get off the bus and then she just disappeared. Around 2 p.m, my brother got a call from an Iraqi number. The man on the line said, "Don't look for your sister, don't ask about her, don't file a complaint. Your sister's with us. And if you try to look for her or ask questions, we'll send her back to you dead."
Paranoia is descending over this seaside town. Amidst the mass violence which Sunni rebels carried out against the Alawites along the Syrian coast this spring, women have been particularly vulnerable. Many of them no longer feel safe going out alone.
This whole kidnapping situation is worrying a lot of people. Every day, 2 to 3 women disappear. The victims come from all kinds of backgrounds. Married women, minors, university students, even schoolgirls. This should be taken seriously by all Syrians.
This young woman is now reunited with her mother. She and her sister are one of the 4 women who are known to have safely returned. Her captors, she says, were Sunni armed men driven by a lust for revenge against the Alawites. A concerning claim to the current government, since these men may very well belong to the radical fringes of a new military structure.
It's really not our fault at all. We have nothing to do with the old regime or any of that.
The mother continues the story. She says her daughters were released after 2 months in captivity, left on the street in the middle of the night, dressed in a niqab. Potentially out of fear or shame, the women insist they were not abused. But other survivors have spoken out about being humiliated, drugged, and beaten up.
They disappeared on March 23rd and came back on May 24th. My daughters told me that a car stopped them and asked them, "Are you Sunni or Alawite?" When they said Alawite, men got out with weapons, forced them into the car, and took them away. When they got out, they were put in a basement and stayed there for several months.
These women probably escaped the worst. Some families have received proof their loved ones have been executed. So far, the authorities have not commented on the matter.
High casualties are reported in Syria, with at least 1,000 civilians killed by militant Islamists in the country's west in Latakia, Hama, and Homs. The murdered are religious minorities, including women and children. Joining us with the latest information about this is John Samara. He's executive director of Ananias House. That's an organization that works in Syria and throughout North Africa and the Middle East. John, there are a lot of rumors floating around social media. First, our viewers are concerned primarily, of course, with the fate of our brothers and sisters in Christ. So what can you tell us about Christian victims? Were they targeted? How many were killed and injured? What have you heard?
Well, Gary, thank you for having me. There is a lot of report, and right now what we're seeing, and this has become public report, official report coming also from the Orthodox Church and the Christian and as a whole community inside Syria. There were...
At the essence. And when you can't risk having your most critical systems down, you need...
There were... And the coastal area where Banyas, Latakia, and Tartus, these major cities, and all the villages and the town around surrounding these areas as well, has received severe attack on the Alawite people group, as this is what happened originally by Alawite militant group attacking the new security forces and killing 20 of them. Then in response, this militant group came in, plus the current security forces attacked to respond. But on the way, this militant group began to slaughter villages and towns, eradicating whole towns and villages. Civilian men and women, children were slaughtered. There is a building of only doctors and pharmaceutical people. They went in and they slaughtered everybody in that building, with everybody, men, women, and children. A genocide taking place as we speak in the last 48 hours. It's been horrific atrocity to see this militant radical group going in. They're going into areas where Alawite and Christian villages are located, and they're forcing them to evacuate and to leave. As they forced them to evacuate and leave, they shot with cold blood, shot and killed many of them, and some of them were Christian, as a firm report coming from the field from the Orthodox Church as well. But as well, we as evangelical Christian in Syria, we lost a father and a son. A father and a son were forced to leave. They were forced to evict by this radical group. And at checkpoint, they were cold-blooded, shot and murdered. These are believers, part of the church body. And we mourn with our families, we mourn with our churches, and we mourn for the other who are innocent, have nothing to do with this battle and this war, but they're caught just because they're part of a sect. And the injustice taking place need to be stopped. Somebody need to speak up from the Western world, from the United States, and to put a stop for this. Now we're seeing a lot of opposition, and one of the things that we're seeing all the Muslim community today, where there was massive protest in Damascus, going in a major area located, a historical area in Damascus, and protesting the killing of the civilian. They're Muslim, Sunni, Christian, Alawite, Druze coming together and united, protesting this evil that taken place, but they were faced by the HTS security forces. They began to shoot bullets in the air and beating on some of the people trying to break these protests. This is not what Syria wants. This is not what the Syrian people want. This is not what the Muslim or the minority or the Christian want this.
John, let me just clarify here. So we know of a father and a son who were